what I actually want to talk about is the second bullet point, tailored to organizations, and how that affects you, how to level up. But there is a bit about me because it sort of reflects how I take things and what my work experience has informed in terms of my view on how organizations prioritize tech differently. So, about me. This is, I don't know, kind of like a weird CV. I grouped where I worked into these categories. I don't usually do this aside from like LinkedIn because, I don't know, it's just kind of awkward. And also because, especially on the left-hand column, they're all probably ones that you know about, except for maybe the top one, which I'll do a little plug for. So ADA, National College for Digital Skills, it's where I work now. I'm head of digital. And I have some coworkers, yeah. And we do tech education, so the technical sixth form focuses on computer science, pulls the tech pipeline and diversifies it, so it gets more girls into tech who become women in tech, and low-income students to also make tech an equalizer as opposed to an elitist subject. So what you'll notice is that, I should say also, my background is as a front-end web developer, and now, as head of digital, I don't do much coding, a little bit, but it's really more about technical project management. So, I've worked in a technical capacity in all of these places, none of which are traditional software companies. The exception is the agency that I worked for 5 years, Blue State Digital. They're kind of an interesting case, agencies in general. Anybody here from an agency? Couple people. I once went to an event where it was 4 agency people, and it was right after I left Blue State. And it suddenly made me realize there was an agency type, which I didn't realize because Blue State was the first and only agency that I worked for. So agencies are kind of their own thing, but Blue State is an agency. It builds websites for companies that hire it. It's also got a software arm, so it has this product called the BSD tools, which, if you're in the fundraising space, you may know about them. They're most famous for being used for the Barack Obama campaign. So this is just sort of like what's to come, because I've been working in tech for organizations that are not really tech focused. Which comes to the main part here. I've categorized organizations into a rough dichotomy, tech-centered or tech-enabled, and obviously I'm going to talk about what those terms that I've made up mean. But the first series of questions is thinking from the organizational point of view. If you answer yes to these, chances are very good that you are what I'm going to call a tech-centered organization. So you're a software company, you provide some kind of tech thing as a service, digital agencies, as I mentioned, tech consulting. This is basically when you're an agency or when you're a consultant in the tech space, you are acting as the outsourcing element for some other company that does not have that ability in-house. Right? That's the whole point of the relationship. So as a digital agency, you are tech-focused, tech-centered. And then not a 100% surefire check, but if the senior leadership has a tech background, not just CTO, obviously, but if the founder has a computer science background, if the CEO used to be a product manager, that's kind of an indication that that's where the DNA of the company is. The flip side of that is the tech-enabled. So is it within the realm of possibility, like not necessarily a good idea, but is it within the realm of possibility to outsource the tech team? Are there hard constraints on HQ location? So for example, if you work in government, let's say civil service here, you're not going to be anywhere else besides the UK. Ambassadors and foreign service aside. Or if your team has to be, it could be anywhere, but they have to be together to talk about something, they can't be fully remote, then that's a sign that you're a tech-enabled company. And if your industry existed 30 years ago, because that's roughly how long I think tech as we know it, in terms of software development, has been around, which is most of the world, then you are probably tech-enabled. So anything like banking, insurance, education, politics. So what that means is tech-centered companies they get a lot of buzz and they get a lot of press, but they're actually relatively new and they're actually the minority. So most people are going to be working in a company where tech is very important because it's 2017, and may even be critical to the business, it probably is critical to the business, but it is not the thing that if you took away from the company actually would fall apart. So if you look at like Salesforce, right? If you take away the thing that they're building, there is no company anymore. But if you look at ASOSWC and you take away their tech, they're still a bank. And actually, that kind of example, you can still actually go into the branch and maybe do something, although what they do these days, I'm not really sure. So I've mentioned all along that tech is still important for all of them, right? So this is how not to tell. It doesn't matter how big the tech teams are, it doesn't matter how many developers there are or designers. There's not an indication in how much people care about the work and whether it's critical to business, because these days, yes, tech is critical to business no matter what. And so I talked about tech-centered organizations, tech-enabled organizations. I talked about the adjectives, but what about the noun? So what is an organization as I'm defining it? Sometimes you can say it's the whole company. I don't really like to say company because a lot of the workplaces that I've had have not really been corporate, have been education, have been nonprofits, have been politics. There's organizations, obviously. But for the purposes of my distinction of tech-centered versus tech-enabled, an organization can be much smaller than that. It can be just a single team. It can be a unified team, and you can have inception organizations. So even something like a classic tech-enabled organization would be like an airline, right? So let's say BA has been having lots of IT problems, but is an airline company, right? If you took away the tech, things have fallen apart. But if you took away the airplanes, there's no more BA. That being said, within BA, of course, there are tech functions, really large tech organizations, where they are all about the software. So you can definitely have tech-enabled organizations. Without examples, tech-centered inside tech-enabled. You can also have vice versa. So Google, right, massive company, and I'll talk a little bit about the really massive tech companies. They are one or the other, but they're kind of all of the above as well, and there's a range in the middle. So we classically think of the products that Google has, right? Search, algorithms, Gmail. So those obviously have software engineers that are working on them directly, and if you took that away, there's no more Gmail. But there are huge sales sides, right? There are huge marketing, and those will be tech-enabled because it will still need tools that are built for them, but they are not in that part of the company where the tech is all important. So what does it mean? Obviously there are pros and cons to both, so I'll go through a few of them. In a tech-centered organization, the tech team, and it's not just developers, but to make it simple, sometimes I'll refer to it just as those, they are the rock stars. They're the most important. Without them, the whole definition, without them, the organization doesn't exist. As a result of that, sometimes they get to play by different rules. So there's kind of like the classic Mark Zuckerberg in a hoodie. And you get to play with new technology as part of your job because the tech is so important. Playing with something new always has a risk element, and that's just kind of part of the point. But it's considered acceptable to go through that process because the reward for trying something new and being the first adopter is significant. However, the potential downside, you might be optimizing for things that don't actually matter. So you can spend your time doing a lot of things with the code that don't have significant enough impact given the time that you're spending. And you don't really have to know the business. You can kind of focus on, I am building a website, I am working on this algorithm, I need to get the algorithm to be 10% more accurate in recommendations. And yes, that has a real world application, eventually somewhere down the line, but depending on where you are in the organization, you don't really have to think about the application. You can think about the theory, you can work on R&D. And the idea that that's someone else's job is a luxury that you have, and I'll come back to that later. So, a tech-enabled organization, you cannot get away from the fact that the thing that you're working on in the tech is serving another purpose. So you are definitely working on real-world problems. Whether they're meaningful, I don't want to put meaningful here because I don't necessarily consider like delivery or Uber Eats to be the most meaningful things you could work on. No offense to anybody who might be working on those. But they're definitely like, you're going to see, the motorcycles around, and you're like, oh well, they're optimizing for the restaurant operations, and you can see that in action. And because of that, it's really important that you get the deep context. So this is a term that I've taken from another article, and we'll get back into. So like really how the business works, because that's important for you to incorporate into the technical decisions that you're making. And it becomes, it takes time to develop, and a lot of people will get into specialisms, like logistics and operational development, airline development, things where you just know all the edge cases because you're doing it for so long. I mean, it's general familiarity, but it's not about your specific function in tech. It's about how the tech serves the business. However, tech is not the top priority in an organization, even if it is competitive advantage and all of that. So you may have to fight for internal resources, which can include team members, conference budget, double monitors, and maybe even yourself. And you may be too pragmatic about the things that you are able to do with your existing tech without focusing on how you need to actually improve the tech. Because you can tinker a little bit, you can make it work, and you can see that it is having real world impact, but then you can lose sight of the fact that the tech itself does need to be prioritized because tech moves so fast these days anyway. Your tech stack and your tech skills can quickly get outdated. So that's all well and good. We talked about the organizations that you might be working for, the different things that you watch out for, kind of on an organizational level. But I want to talk about how it affects you as an individual and what you can do with this information. You might have noticed with the pros and cons that I had before, they're a little bit mirror image of each other. So if you're in a tech-centered org, there's a lot of perception issues that you may not have to see because, especially in a larger organization, you are working with other developers and other engineers, and everyone is just sort of other. But there's a lot of perception that can get in the way in relationships. So understanding the non-technical areas of how you're perceived is an important thing to be aware of. And when gaining context about the business, the one that comes naturally for technical organizations, you might have to work at it a little bit. So vice versa, if you're in a tech-enabled organization, as I said, you have to advocate for yourself for how tech priorities fit into the business priorities, and this should be a little bit easier because you already understand the business priorities on some level. So you just need to do that internal persuasion if it's needed to say, I understand the business as a whole and we are flying planes, but here's how the tech makes it so much better, and if we don't pay attention to the tech, here are the problems. And that includes trade-offs, largely I think having to do with technical debt. And I really like this article which I linked, and I think the slides will be available afterwards. It's all you can see from 2012, but it's called On Being a Senior Engineer from John Osborne, who used to be VP of Engineering at Etsy. And it's about how being a senior engineer is not about your technical skill, it's about everything else. Also, a little bit on startups. So startups I'm still sort of figuring this out, but I think they are everything because they're so small. So even if you are a tech startup, a health tech startup, a fintech startup, insurtech, whatever it is, all of those, because they have the industry in front of it, you think that they would be tech enabled, but they're at a point where if you don't focus on the tech as a top priority, again, your whole business is gone. So I'm going to come back to the deep context that I talked about, and this is valuable for everyone. So this line comes from this article. The most valuable asset in the software industry is a synthesis of programming skill and deep context in the business problem domain in one skull. Right, so one skull being yours. The programming skill by itself is becoming a commodity. Right, so you can get really good developers these days who charge $5 an hour from Estonia. And the idea that you can just throw a problem over the wall and give a brief, and it's fine, right? And you can outsource your tech and save costs and all of this. It's not actually true, so I skipped a little bit, but avoiding the race to the bottom, what the business problem domain gives you is that key competitive advantage that someone offshore can't get, no matter how invested they are, no matter how smart they are. There's something different about being on site with a team of people where you're doing it every day, this sort of mind meld, that means that problems that require both are not going to be outsourced. And the advantage of once you have deep context is that you can switch hats more easily to understand the customer because you understand the business. Therefore, you don't end up building the wrong product, which is basically the most common problem in what businesses do when you build something and hope that they come. So in terms of you as an individual, I'm going to make the assumption that everyone's trying to move up the ladder. Seniority leads to knowledge of the business by necessity. So if you get promoted up on the left side, as part of your new responsibilities, you're going to have to learn a little bit more about the business because that's just part of your scope increasing. And by the time you get to CTO or VP of engineering, you have to know the business really well. Well, critically. But there's another way that you can go about it, which is not guaranteed, but will help. So if you are, for example, an individual contributor, and I see it's good for you to have knowledge of the business, right? It's good for everyone to have it. But the more you know, the more you can already prove that you're operating at the next level. And that is one potential way to move up the chain that is not necessarily having to do with purely your technical skill, but other things that you bring value to. And if you have any discussions or disagreements, now's the time. Yeah.
Hi. So, as somebody who might be in between both tech centers or South tech center or not, how, this is my perspective as a developer, how would you deal with if you see, like, I use this product as a, how would you see it? How would you give your input? As in, because one of the things is seeing the user's point of view in sort of way, how do you force it above when it doesn't happen? I know I'm not making myself very clear, but it feels like sometimes you might be in a tech-centered where you don't see much of the business, or maybe yes or no, but you still want to contribute to it, but there's also like battles in it. Have you ever dealt with that? Or
so you're interested in knowing the business, but there's no opportunity for you to?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually why I've left jobs before. I think that there are some ways in which if if you manage to do it without asking for permission, and obviously you're still performing in your regular job, it's not something that people really fight against. It's just that they may not say, oh, this is something that you're interested in and we're going to give you 15% of your time to go and do it, right? They may not consider things from that perspective, but I mean, a lot of it is about relationship building. That's how you gain knowledge, right? So actually, I forgot to come back to the point of it's not my job in tech-centered organizations, which sounds like it's opposite for you, right? Your manager said it's not your job.
Yeah.
Regardless, the way to get around that is to prioritize it yourself, right? And in your company, in any company, there are going to be so many other pieces that are not tech that have interfaces with the external world, with your customers, with vendors, or without whichever kind of problem that your business is solving with the tech. So you can talk to people in marketing or in product, research, business analysis, finance. So those people will all have a different perspective on how the tech is serving them, and hopefully that should just give you more voices. So it's not necessarily that it's a formal thing, right? It's very much about conversations and going to the pub and relationship building. Although if your company has a formal UX or user research component, generally they're in favor of developers actually sitting in on those sessions.
So as you mentioned in your talk, there's a lot of sort of tech-enabled, I think it's the word, I hope that's right. There's more tech-enabled and tech-centered places. So if you're someone who works...
Right, so there's obviously a lot more tech-enabled companies or organisations around. So if you're someone who maybe doesn't have a huge knowledge of tech, but you want to be able to, suggest changes or better, more efficient ways of working for your company, can you recommend any sort of good places to look, or any things that you can do to upskill and help yourself to be more effective for your organization?
Coming from the opposite side, as a non-tech person in a tech-enabled company, if you're a non-tech person trying to build that bridge, it doesn't really matter what organization you're in. Some of it's still the same. It's still like relationship building, getting to know your friendly developer, and it is a different skill set and a different way of interacting that you probably have to learn. And I don't really love saying that, but being a developer and having worked with developers, there's definitely certain systems that are just very common in ways of building software that developers bring to interacting with anybody at all. And so part of that is knowing how a developer spends their time and what's also important to them, right? It's empathy on the other side.
Do you have any advice or experience that you'd like to talk about in terms of when you're on the bridge between the two, when you are tech-centered but you have to deal with the tech-enabled corporations, and how you can do that effectively?
Yeah, interesting. So you may have noticed in my first slide, most of the time I've been working for tech-enabled organizations, and although that can get frustrating because you're constantly advocating for something, like for me, that's actually not going away, because more important than that to me is seeing that real-world impact, and particularly in the sort of social mission and nonprofit space. So, so in terms of building a bridge, sometimes those kinds of organizations, like thinking of a university that I used to work for, and obviously their mission is education, right? And they have tens of thousands of people in the education mission. And then they had essentially an in-house agency. And that in-house agency would go to different departments as time and budget allowed and say, okay, well, you need a new website because you are the School of Management or the School of Economics, and we'll build you a new website, you'll be our client, and somehow the finances were taken care of internally. But that means that in that space, even though they are part of the same organization, effectively, relationship-wise, they're not. They just have more automatic deep context because they are working with the same provost and the same registrar. I'm not sure that really answers the question, but sort of like building the bridges, I think, is something that people have to want to do. It's not necessarily something that is automatic. Last call? Okay, thank you. Oh no, one more.
You talk about these like different types and like sort of generalize about them. Do you think it's like useful or desirable to like maintain those differences, or do you think ultimately like we should be like breaking down the differences and having like a more consistent approach to technology?
Oh, I don't think organizations think of them as one or the other. I don't get that impression, except maybe on the very far extremes. Like if you're a startup where all you're doing is like I don't know, like the DeepMind, right, before it was acquired by Google. If they're working on solving Go with AI, it doesn't really have a useful application yet, but the tech is very interesting. And then you have plenty of organizations that are not even tech-enabled, right? They're just organizations, right? Like your local restaurant, where they don't even think about tech as a function. It's just a product that they might have for your website. I would say that there's a range within that sort of false dichotomy, but I think it's useful more to think about, the way that I'm presenting it, is that it's useful more to think about as someone who's navigating within the organization, rather than making a framework that businesses subscribe to. All right, thank you.